Ngā mana o te motu, tēnā koutou katoa, nau mai anō ki tō tātou marae anei, e hora atu nei. He's a cabinet minister charged with improving things for Māori in a coalition government. Many perceive to have an anti-treaty, anti-Māori agenda. Today, e hoa mā, we talk with our rangatira, our minita whakawhanake Māori, Tama Potaka, about his approach to Māori development, Māori Crown relations, conservation, whānau ora, and social housing. E taku rangatira e mihi ana kia koe, tēnā koe, nau mai kia marae.
Tēnā koe, taku nutu kāka, koutou ko te whānau e whakarongo mai nei.
E mihi nui ana kia koe, mohi anau e nui o mahi i tēnei wā nei, e hari te mea mahi kā wanatanga, engari mahi a whānau, mahi a iwi, whakatatuki i tēnā kaupapa i tēnā tono, no reira mihi nui ana kia koe, i tō tai mai, tai a tīnana mai i tēnei rā.
Thank you for having me, and anytime you call Scotty, I'll be available.
Tēnā koe, tēnā koe. E hoa kia timata tā tāua kōrero, ki tō tūranga hei minita i te arawhiti, Māori Crown Relations Minister. How do you see the current state of Māori Crown relationships?
Well, first of all, there are two ministers involved with Te Arawhiti. Minister Goldsmith looks after the negotiations for treaty settlements, and Taku Taimoana, customary foreshore seabed matters, and I look after a number of other things like events and making sure that some of the settlement obligations that are outstanding are implemented. And what my view is that some things are going really well. For example, this week we've got the first reading of the Ōrākau settlement legislation or Ōrākau arrangement, whereby the land at Ōrākau, very well-known battle site from the 1860s, is being returned in the name of the tupuna who fought there, and with the management arrangements with Waikato Tainui, Ngāti Maniapoto, Ngāti Raukawa. A couple of weeks ago we had the Taranaki Maunga, first reading of the settlement arrangements for Taranaki Maunga. So I think some things are going really well. But I think there are also challenges that we've got in this litigation and other matters that are confronting us. So some things are going well, some things we need to work on a little bit more.
What are the things we need to work on, do you think?
Well, I can't really comment on the litigation, but it's well known, Wakatu and other matters. But the Māori Crown Relations portfolio is also responsible for implementing the settlement obligations that are outstanding, and there are over 10,000 of those outstanding, mainly with organisations and agencies such as Te Papa Atawhai, Department of Conservation, and LINZ, Land Information New Zealand. So that's one area where I've got a big focus with my team at Te Arawhiti, is to make sure we understand the gamut of responsibilities that come after treaty settlements are arranged and the legislation's gone through. Okay, what obligations do we have now? And there's a lot of work that we have to do in that space to make sure we follow through. And the Crown's obligations do not stop when a settlement arrangement is concluded. Actually, they continue over time, and that's the promise of Te Tiriti o Waitangi, the Treaty of Waitangi.
As I've said, you're a very busy person, e taku rangatira, and you've been to Ōrākau. Yes. You went to all the kotahitanga hui. What have Māori on the ground been saying to you in terms of about how they perceive our relationship as Māori with the Crown in your role as Minister of Te Arawhiti?
I think there's a wide range and mix, quite a diversity of opinion. People are really enthusiastic about the focus to restore or get the economy back on track. There's real concern with costs of living, interest rates, inflation. Those things are really hurting whānau Māori at a very basic level and making it very hard for whānau Māori to survive. And then there are these other dynamics around whether or not it's the litigation that I mentioned, and some of the concerns that people have had with announcements around the Treaty Principles Bill and other things. So I think there's mixed views, but what is absolutely clear for me from attending the kotahitanga hui at Tūranga Waiwai, then the Rātana celebrations, and a couple of other hui like at Waitangi, is that there's an absolute appetite for kotahitanga amongst Māori, but amongst Aotearoa New Zealand, and Māori are really at the spearhead or the tip of the taiha to ensure that that kotahitanga is not one way.
So how do you see kotahitanga rolling out in terms of being inclusive of the wider community in Aotearoa? Because as Māori, I think what's galvanised Māori into kotahitanga at this point in time is the reaction to some of the negativity that the government has announced regarding Māori. and that's brought about these kotahitanga hui. So Māori have always grappled with kotahitanga amongst ourselves, but it's starting to sort of come to fruition, a kotahitanga movement. But I think that's only for this point in time. That's to galvanise ourselves to be able to push back against some of the government policy of this time. When we get to a point where Māori concerns are allayed in some sort of shape or form, we will then go back to our tribal entities and into our iwi groups, and the kotahitanga movement may be shelved for a little bit at that point in time. So do you think that kotahitanga will last, and how can kotahitanga be spread across the wider communities in Aotearoa?
Well, I think that one thing you mentioned there is that we will do our own iwi hapu whānau things probably in a rangatiratanga context. And we do those things for our own whānau and communities in Hapori. Around the kotahitanga at a pan-tribal level, I think that there's been different threads of kotahitanga over time. We had different movements, like the kotahitanga movement, like the kingitanga movement, and others. And I also think there's a lot of ballast or a lot of momentum in certain sectors. For example, around the reo sector, whether or not that's in kura or in other activities, we've got a lot of energy and a lot of focus. It was wonderful yesterday. I went to the Tamatatini regionals down at Waikato Tainui and saw Te Pai o Kahurangi made it through to the Matatini
Were
Nationals.
there any compositions about you in particular?
No,
not yet.
No, I'm there to support the kaupapa and look forward to the Nationals next year. But certainly I think that the notion of kotahitanga across all New Zealanders is the key akamata or key vine that runs through Te Tiriti or Waitangi, and that's something that many of us have grappled with over our time, let alone people who have come before us in the last 180 years. So when I look out to 2040, I say, what do we want to see there? Or what I really want to support tautoko and help facilitate is the expeditious settlement of outstanding historical treaty claims like Ngāpuhi, like Mōkai Pātea, Ngāti Raukawa Te Ao ki Te Tonga, and others. That's something that the National Party started, national-led governments under Jim Bolger and others, and has continued by successive governments since then. But that's something we really need to attend to in a very strong and motivated way. On the other side, we have some needs, whether or not it's in economic, education, health, housing, environmental, language. And we've had different policies over time to address some of those needs. But right now, I think those needs, particularly education, health, housing, law and order, are very, very pressing, particularly for a large group of, large numbers of Māori. So, for example, you look at the job seekers amongst our communities. There's nearly 200,000 folks on job seeker. 4 out of 10 are Māori. Now, that's a real concern for me. There's now 135,000 Māori who are dependent on benefits. That's a concern for me. And I think we have to work harder and smarter and with reach into communities through mechanisms such as whānau ora to tautoko those people. So that the notion of kotahitanga is around a number of sectors. It's around a number of kaupapa. And what we need to do, and certainly I need to do as the Minister of various kaupapa Māori oriented portfolios, is make sure I'm listening on the ground. I'm seeing what works and doesn't work, and facilitating or supporting agencies to collaborate with those people who are delivering genuine, real results.
You mentioned there that you've got a variety of portfolios that are all connected into kaupapa Māori. How are you coping with all that, Tama? Because you've got Māori development, Crown relations, you've also got whānau ora, you've got taiao, you've got housing. How are you managing to keep all of this in balance and be able to focus on your priorities in each of those portfolio for the benefit of our Māori whānau, our Māori hapu, our Māori people?
Well, first thing is that I'm very well supported by my own whānau, and they certainly hold me accountable at a whānau end, whether or not it's my nuclear whānau wife in Tamariki, but also my cousins, my aunties, my uncles, who will give me feedback, often unsolicited feedback, as to what's going right and wrong. But I'm also very well supported by the Prime Minister, the Minister of Finance, and the Coalition Cabinet and Coalition Government, who are very acutely aware and have very clear observations around the state of play. Now, we have different discussions and debates around what are the best mechanisms to address some of the needs within my 5 portfolios. But what I see through the portfolios are really pressing let's call them tiriti, treaty issues, and also really pressing needs. And that segues or intersects with my own experiences, whether or not it's working for iwi, working for the New Zealand Superannuation Fund, the Guardians there, working at a community level, helping with health and wellbeing events like Try Māori, or STEM education like Squiggle. So I've had the great fortune to have those experiences and bring those to bear. The key for me is making sure that I reach into and connect with people who have really delivered results over time. So whilst we might have differences of opinion about certain things, I like to engage with people who I think and who are demonstrably focused on delivering results, whether or not that's in the whānau water sector, people like Debbie Sorensen down at Pacifica Futures, or John and Awarangi out at Te Whānau or Waipareira, iwi communities, people like Rikirangi Gage and Willie Te Aho down on the East Coast, but people out in Taranaki like Liana Potu and Jamie Tuta, but to understand what they're seeing and whether or not we can sync or tilt the portfolios in a manner that actually government isn't everything for everybody, but we can support and enable whānau, hapori communities to do really positive things. That's the sort of stuff I'm into.
How much cut through do you get though with your colleagues in government? So you say you're talking a lot with Nicola Willis and you're talking a lot with Christopher Luxon and they support you, but
yes,
how much cut through do you get? Because it's wonderful kōrero and wonderful plans and wonderful ideologies, but it seems to me on the face of it when they start making their announcements that there is no cut through from yourself. They're not listening to you, they're not taking on board what you're telling them, and they're just ploughing ahead with what they want to do anyway. And a lot of what they're doing is negative towards Māori or anti-Māori. Yeah,
well, I think I think that's your view, and I respect that view. But let me give an example: emergency housing. You know, there are 3,000 households in emergency housing or thereabouts right now. Many of whom are actually in Rotorua and Hamilton, where you and I are both partly from, and the numbers of Māori within those two locations are into the 70% or so of those people living in emergency housing in Rotorua and Hamilton are Māori. So the engagement that I've had with Minister Bishop, with Minister Willis and others to really focus on ensuring that the emergency housing numbers come down, that we can take steps to ensure more houses are built or activated to enable those whānau Māori and others, particularly those with tamariki, to migrate out of a difficult, catastrophic environment of emergency housing into a warm, safe home. For me, that's a real focus on those people who are in genuine need, that need a real home.
I know that the whānau in Rotorua are not very happy at the moment with the request to extend the emergency housing and some of the motels there for another 2 years. I know that...
No, I'm very aware of that, and that matter has to be addressed offline with the council and groups like Restore Rotorua, but no application in that particular matter has been undertaken yet, and that matter ultimately will come back to the ministers for decision.
Now, Tama Potaka won the seat of Hamilton West in December 2022, dancing into Parliament with a margin of 2,433, and he saw that by-election victory as a sign of things to come.
The sea is blue, the sky is blue, and next year the government will be blue.
At the time, he described his approach to politics as results over ideology.
Not live in ideology, momentum, and kindness, but actually to identify what needs to be done, work with people and get it done. That's really the mantra of what I stand for.
Mata ki te koia koe hoa, I ki koe ka kahurangi te motu, ana, ko kahurangi te motu.
Ana.
But harite mea ko te kahurangi anake. Engari, kei roto hoki te kāwanatanga Aotearoa Tuatahi Act, and we know a lot of the conjecture amongst our people, and the source of te kotahitanga movement that our Kingi Tuheitia has called is, let's say, the negativity towards the Waitangi Tribunal and the Te Tiriti o Waitangi and Act's particular bill of rewriting it. So the Waitangi Tribunal, for example, with the 7AA section of Te Ture Oranga Tamariki, that's been in the news lately. The Waitangi Tribunal wanted the Minister of Children, Karen Shaw, to appear in front of them. The High Court denied that. The Waitangi Tribunal was then criticised by David Seymour, by Shane Jones. Where do you see the Waitangi Tribunal? What do you see as its role now and heading into the future? Is it relevant? Should it still be here?
So the first thing I'd say, just as an observation, is that I think the kotahitanga movement has existed, notwithstanding what the colour of the government.
Current kotahitanga movement.
The current kotahitanga. Well, I think that's an ongoing evolution, and it's been going for many, many decades. But in terms of the Waitangi Tribunal, I think it's done some amazing things over the last 50 years. Particularly when it got established, it was only looking at contemporary claims at the time, and then there was activation into looking into historical claims. People like Sir Eddie Jury and Paul Tem and others did an amazing job, continued by successive tribunal members. That's the second thing. The third thing is that, yes, the tribunal is mentioned in one of the coalition commitments that we would review the tribunal, but that's not a matter that we're currently looking into. We will do that as part of the parliamentary term.
How far will that go?
I don't know. We have to establish terms of reference, and we have to get through that process.
Because you've been a negotiator. You've been right amongst all of the Treaty of Waitangi claims process throughout the years. You know the treaty. You've studied the treaty. I'd even say you're an expert on the treaty, Tama. So how do you reconcile being in a coalition government with people who want to almost rewrite the treaty? They want to change the treaty. They want to adjust it to almost diminish the mana of the treaty and the mana that we have as Māori, as tangata whenua, because of the treaty. How do you
I think what I observe is that the Crown, neither the Crown nor the government can rewrite the treaty Te Tiriti o Waitangi. It stands for what it is, and it has that international dimension when it was drafted at the time. When you get into discussions around the Treaty Principles Bill, the Waitangi Tribunal, and a number of other things, there is a lot of kōrero, there's a lot of concern that's been communicated to me. But we as a coalition, a cabinet and government are approaching these matters one step at a time, and in the envelope in which we have our agreements with the different parties, national with ACT and then national with New Zealand First, and we exist as a coalition and we work on those matters. But my role will be to ensure that the responsibilities I have as the Minister of Māori Development, as the Minister of Māori Crown Relations and other matters are brought to bear in those discussions.
When does it get to the point in those discussions where you as Minister of Māori Development, but you as Tama Potaka, me o iwi katoa, tō whānau kei muri a koe, tautoko ana i a koe, hāpai ana i a koe, when does it get to the point when you say enough is enough, this needs to stop here now? Well,
I'm a very strong advocate and very strong purveyor of the experiences, the skills, the knowledge that I have around the Te Tiriti o Waitangi and the treaty. And I always come back to making sure that I am aligned with the mahi that the coalition government is doing, with the statements and the communications that the Prime Minister has made. So I'm part of the government, part of the coalition, and I'll continue to ensure that my ministerial responsibilities are fulfilled, but bring to bear the skills, knowledge and understandings and awareness of the treaty that I have.
Optics is quite important.
Yes.
Appearances are quite important. Yes. So as Māori people looking at the government and what the government's doing, on the face of it, it looks like you're almost being muzzled. You're being told not to say anything against the pathway that the government's taking, against what ACT is doing in terms of the treaty principles. It's like we haven't heard any really strong pushback from you at all. Do you think that you need to be more forceful and be more vocal in a public sense, not just in negotiations behind closed doors, but out in the public, so Māori people are looking at you and thinking, he's got our back, he's going to fight for the treaty for us. We don't need to be as anxious as what we are.
Well, how I describe it is that I'm very resolute in supporting the Prime Minister's view, particularly on matters such as the Treaty Principles Bill, which has been proposed. That's a great example where a Treaty Principles Bill has been proposed and a coalition agreement, National and the ACT Party have agreed that that bill will be taken to a first reading into Select Committee, and the Prime Minister has asserted, and I support the Prime Minister, that's where it will end. There will be no referendum, and we're very resolute about that.
Okay. Me whakapono ki a koe e hoa, e te rangatira, e tama, me whakapono ki a koe me tēnā kōrero ka tahi anō ka puta i tō waha. Ka mutu, ko tētahi o ngā mahi tuatahi a te kāwanatanga nei,
Yes.
he whakaheke i te mana o te reo. I roto i ngā ingoa o ngā manatū kāwanatanga, kia noho taina te reo Māori, kia noho tuakana te reo Pākehā. E matatau ana koe ki te reo, e aroha nui ana koe ki te reo, i pēhea ngā tai o tō ngākau i te wā i puta mai ai tēnā whakatau a te kāwanatanga, kia whakaheke a te mana o te reo i roto i ngā ingoa manatu. I pēhea ngā whakaaro o roto i tō ngākau i tauawa.
Well, māku e ki atu, kei te whakariterite mai ngā pūrere hua ki taku manawa. Kia kitea, kia kōkiri hoki te reo Māori i ngā wā katoa aopo pō ao. Nā reira kia tai atu koe, ki roto i te whare miere, ka kōrero Māori a tama. Hei whakatauira, ki ngā mema e mōhiona ki te kōrero Māori, me kaha whakarewa tātou i tō tātou reo mā koha. I tō tātou reo Māori ora, ki tōna whare pāremata a ake. Nā reira, koira tāku he tautoko i ngā mema ki a kōrero Māori, Pākehā mai, āhia mai, Māori mai, aha mai, tuatai. Tuarua, e mōu ana ki ngā kō piko kei rungi te huarahi o tō tātou reo. Me te mea nei ko āta rangona e aku taringa kite e te o ngā kōrero e pāna ki te whakatūpāpaku i te reo, te whakataina i te reo, te whakangoikore i tō tātou reo. Engari ki au nei, me tū tātou aha ko ngā kōrero a tēnā, ki te kōrero i te reo Māori, ki te tuhi i te reo Māori, ki te hake i te reo Māori, ki te harane, ki te kangakanga i te reo Māori. E kōrongo hoki au ki iti kangakanga ki au, ki te reo Māori, ki te reo Pākehā rānei. Nā reira, tōna kōrero mō tērā āhuatanga. Ko te take, me mātou, me mōhio hoki te maria, ki te ingoa o ia ohu, o ia hohu. Kei te piki haere, te whakamahi i te reo Māori. Nā reira, me noho reo rua ngā ohu katoa. Ki au nei, and this is where I'm coming from, it's really important for Crown agencies and the government to be able to converse, to engage in the language that suits the user. And increasingly, that user is using te reo Māori. So for me, the Crown agencies, departments, need to be able to communicate effectively and increasingly in te reo Māori. And that's why I continue to tautoko, whether or not it's NZTA or Waka Kotahi, or Kāinga Ora and Homes and Communities, I will use te reo Māori to describe those organisations.
Kāinga Ora.
And I will continue to use Kāinga Ora. Others may use Homes and Communities or NZTA. Kei te pai, ngā reo e rua. Koira te moe a te tiriti o Waitangi.
Ko te tai ao, tā tāua kaupapa, nā te mea koera hoki tētahi o kawenga i roto i te kāwanatanga. And you have said, my friend, we've always believed, my father and mother, my brother, my sister and I, that if you look after the whenua, it will look after you. It's one of our fundamental responsibilities in life. How does that whānau quote fit with your government wanting to mine on conservation land? Well,
there are many mines already on conservation land, many mines that are already existing. And what we are using through the fast-track approvals process, if that's what we're going to talk about, is just a method or way to increase or expedite development to grow the economy. But we do have to take into account, and we do have to ensure that tile objectives, environmental concerns are satisfied as well.
Well, it is connected to that fast track, the bill of fast track. And you know, as we know, Shane Jones is very pro-mining. What do you make of that, having someone of his ilk, someone of his calibre, someone of his standing being in Te Ao Māori, and Te Ao Māori being a very conservation-focused group of people? What do you make of Shane Jones' stance on pro-mining?
You know, I think that there are different rangatira throughout the motu that are pro-mining, they're pro-aquaculture, they're pro-development. I think many of our rangatira, and some have different weightings for environmental, social, cultural and other concerns, and people weight things differently. But I think it's pretty ironic that many of us who want to stop, who have wanted to stop mining in Aotearoa are very happy to have coal from Indonesia shipped in to New Zealand at a greater cost. So I think it's not polarised, it's not mutually exclusive. I think there are different positions on the spectrum around how we look at development, whether or not that's housing, mining, aquaculture or other matters. And certainly when I see some tribal initiatives like the Hananui Aquaculture Project that have been curtailed or prevented under the existing regimes, I think, is there a better way to enable Māori economic development?
Hi anu ki te mihi ki a koe, nā te mea, mai rāno tāu e hoa ana, hoa ako ana, hoa futuporo ana, hoa kura ana.
Engari, ko koe kei runga, ko au kei roro.
Engari, ka te tiro atu ki a koe, ko eke koe ki tēnei taumata o te minita whakawhanake Māori, tūranga rangatira, tūranga whaimana, me te mihi nui ki a koe. And I remember when we were all about to go and attend the kotahitanga hui e tūranga waiwai, and we all sat there, just as a bunch of mates in the foyer area at the Hotel Tainui, and having a conversation there. And I think everybody who was there felt really proud of you and what you've achieved and where you are at now. And I'm sure the sentiment was there that we all really hope that you have our backs and that you're going to look after all of the kaupapa Māori that we've built over the last few years, that you're going to help to protect those and move those forward. In terms of you, in terms of Tama Potaka, and in terms of your career, did you always plan to go into politics? And if you did, who were some of your political heroes that you aspired to be like, that were there as your tauire, as your iho pū manawa hei whai atu mau?
I'm very lucky and I'm very privileged and honoured to be in the space and place that I am today. And it's because of a number of my uncles, aunties, mentors, guides, kaiako, kai whakahaere, kai whakamatara, that I've been able to get to where I am today. And I don't stand here alone, I stand with many others, some who have passed, some who are still here, and some who continue to hold me accountable, Tā Timoti and others included. So I'm very lucky, that's the first thing. The second thing is that when I was a young boy growing up in Rangitike and Ruapehu and other places around Wanganui, Taranaki, and also out on the Wairarapa coast for a moment, I had a real urge and spirit and focus on being the best Māori that I could be and being the best New Zealander I can be. And I still hold true to that in my whānau life with my wahine and tamariki, and my community life, but also being a representative of the hardworking people of Hamilton West. So those things are brought to bear. And when I was going through Te Aote, whakatupuranga rua mano, te kāpune reo, te panekiretanga, Victoria University of Wellington and Columbia University and other places, te wānanga o Aotearoa, I had a real aspiration to contribute to not only the survival and identity of our Māori communities, but also to the potential of our Māori communities. So when I see evidence that shows that building the Māori economy and building Māori society and communities will raise New Zealand far more than letting us just amble along, that's what really motivates me, inspires me to say, actually through policy, through government mahi, through the mahi that I can do, how can I accelerate the growth and the evolution of our community, our society, iwi, hapu, marae, but also our economy. Making sure we operate in environmental, language and other envelopes that we're responsible for. So that holistic focus, when I look at people like Matua Whatarangi Muniata, like our Matua Mason Jury and others, their kaupapa isn't necessarily a tohu or a practice like law or media. Their kaupapa is kotahitanga, manawa Māori, kaupapa Māori. And that's what I live for, and that's what our whānau live for.
Ko rangatira katoa, marae a koe i tēnei rā. E te minita e te rangatira tama, e mihi nui ana ki a koe i o kōrero katoa. I tēnei rā, me te mōhio iho, kai a koe te kawenga nui. Kia toi tū te tiriti, kia toi tū te reo, kia toi tū te mana motu hake, i heke mai ai o tātou mātua tūpuna ki a tātou. Anei, e mihi atu nei ki a koe Tama Potaka, taku rangatira tēnā koe.
Kei taku toa taumata rau pātaka kai, e mihi ana ki a koe, kia koutou katoa.
Kia ora tātou. Hoi anō rei tiwi, that's Marae for this week. The team will be back with you next Sunday. Ngā manakitanga o te wā, kia ora, hui hui mai, tātou katoa. Ko te reo, te take.